I am incredibly excited to introduce our next and our first national speaker who's joining us here today. Now, Ted Dintersmith, I am going to adopt as a North Dakotan. He's making his sixth trip up to North Dakota. This guy has spent birthdays, holidays, more time than I could possibly fathom, touring the state, engaging with educators, and is a true champion and advocate for the position that North Dakota is in to lead the world in education. Ted Dintersmith.
Thank you. I take it. Okay. So in about 20 minutes, you can tell him, no, we don't want to adopt this guy. We, in fact, never want to see him again, so that's all fine. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to start. Several years ago, I became so convinced that the most important issue we face as a civil society, as a country, is getting school right in terms of fighting for the best outcomes, the best prospects for our kids. It was so important to me, I took on the project of making a film. I didn't make the film. If you love the film and have seen it, give all the credit to the director. But I want to show a clip, the trailer for the film, because that sort of lays out some of the key issues on my mind. There's no audio.
Jeff, there's no audio. 40 or 50-minute blocks typically, and then we ring bells and people start to shuffle around the building and do something else. That's an organizational device. It's not an educational principle.
10 university heads in 1890 said, in 11th grade, everyone should learn chemistry. In senior year, everyone should learn physics. A lot of these subjects are great, but these priorities were dictated 124 years ago.
The old blue-collar industrial model of education is already gone. We're already living in its wake.
What happens to society when hundreds of millions of people have that aimless, rudderless feeling of, I've been replaced by a very small box? I don't know if there's a solution.
We all learn in different ways. This isn't the way to do it. This is the way that I did it.
If the assignment is you get it back and you crumple it up and throw it in the trash can, that's kind of one student experience. And if the assignment is to produce something that you're going to present to professionals in the field, that's completely changing the whole dynamic.
We are trying to have that type of perplexity and curiosity get inculcated in our students.
Saying your parents, all your friends' parents, and a bunch of people you don't know are gonna be here to see the work you did. It creates an aspect of authenticity, because we are creating something for an audience.
The things I think in life that give us some of the greatest satisfaction is making something that wasn't there before.
And I can't wait for that moment when it does work and I'm completely done with it. And it's like all leaves. It'll be one of the greatest moments in my life.
When kids have that feeling, it's transformative for them. I made this, and everyone's coming to look at it.
So if you haven't seen that film, I'd love you to do it. We'll make sure anybody in North Dakota who wants to see it can see it. But I wanted to explain and express my thanks to this state and to explain why I keep coming back. So 2 years ago, not only had I never been to North Dakota, I think I knew one person that I was sure was from North Dakota, a guy named Jim Thompson. I don't know if you know Jim, but he's an amazing person, started an organization called Positive Coaching Alliance. And he said to me, you know, I know you're interested in education. There are really interesting things going on in North Dakota. And so he set me up with a call with a guy in Fargo. Many of you may know him, Greg Tavine. And so I talked to him, it was in July 2 summers ago, and we're on the phone talking. I'm just saying, like, tell me who's doing interesting things, you know, what can I learn from North Dakota? And in the middle of the phone call, this is all true, in the middle of the phone call, he said, oh my gosh, somebody just canceled for TEDx Fargo next week. Could you be here and give a talk? That would jumpstart things. And so I had 6 days notice to rearrange my schedule, get to Fargo, and actually try to come up with a talk. And so I said, like, you know, if nothing else, it's the one state I hadn't been to. I mean, so that's a good reason to go. So I did that. And so I came here, and as I thought about that trip, I said, you know, I am going to learn something here. Who knows what? You know, most of my friends would say, why are you going to North Dakota? you're not going to learn much there. You know, like you got to go to Silicon Valley or Boston, Massachusetts to see really innovative things, but so be it. But I thought, you know, like if I could learn something, I mean, maybe I should just do something bigger than that. And so as I came here, I said, maybe I should go to all 50 states this school year. So in that talk, I actually was the first time I made that commitment. So I said, I'm going to go in one school year to all 50 states. But what was so interesting about that event, I gave the talk, and I met so many people here doing incredible things in the world of education. And a group of citizen volunteers in Fargo got really interested in organizing an event around the film. So within 6 weeks, we pulled off an event, September of 2015, and we had 500 people. We'll show you a clip later today about that event. But 500 people came to the theater in downtown Fargo, including, you hadn't even declared at that point, but including Doug Burgum. I get, walking back to my hotel that night, I get an email from Kirsten, who says, any chance you're in North Dakota, any chance we could get together tomorrow? I'm in Bismarck. I figure, how far can Bismarck be from Fargo? So I don't even look at Google Maps. I say, yeah, I'll be there. And I said, oh, that's a little bit further than I thought. And I just said, boy, there's an energy level here and a vision and a willingness to do things. It's very, very inspiring. And so I just keep coming back. And I sort of said along the way, kind of in passing, you know, I think North Dakota has a real opportunity to, and the phrase I used was outdo Finland. Now, why Finland? And you know, like, other than the fact that North Dakota's very far north and Finland's even more north, so maybe those are the two things in common. But Finland's interesting, right? Finland is something we should all pay attention. If you ask educators, people who are serious about education in our country, for examples of education transformation, education environments they admire, everyone will say, you need to understand what's going on in Finland. What's interesting is Finland will say to you, do not do what we're doing. We don't want people to think of us as, we don't, in fact, are allergic to people calling us the best. What we want to do is be the best for our kids. Education's intensely personal, intensely local. No one should copy what Finland's doing. Just as in my film, we show a school in California, but we go out of our way to say, don't copy this school. Learn from it and invent and create an education experience that works best for your kids. And so Finland, you know, I'll highlight a few of the things that were interesting. I was there for a couple weeks 2 years ago. And the first thing that's interesting, right, is that Finland, the reason they got so much attention is that they, I think 4 or 5 years ago when the annual OECD PISA test came out, Finland was at the top in most categories. So people say, wow, they're blowing away this test. And yet, Finland doesn't have a single standardized test in the entire K through 12 process. So they do really well on this test, but they have no standardized test in the environment. They actually do way more on, you know, their school day is 5 hours long. It's interdisciplinary. They actually don't teach by subject silos anymore. What's so interesting is that you go there and you see these kids who can't wait to get to school in the morning. You see these kids that are thinking a million miles an hour in their class. I observed one class where the teacher put a really challenging problem on the board in the morning, you know, at the beginning of the session, and said to them, to these students, he said, I'll be back tomorrow. Work alone or in small groups. I don't want your right answer. Come up with as many interesting approaches to this challenge as you can, and left. They trust the teachers in Finland, the teachers trust the students in Finland, amazing things happen, and they don't teach to the test. So it's a very inspiring example. I could talk more about Finland, but I'm actually good friends with Pasi Sahlberg, and Pasi was the architect of Finland's transformation. So I was with him a couple months ago. I said, you know, in the United States, believe it or not, the state I think that has amazing prospects to elevate learning outcomes for all their kids is North Dakota. Now, Pasi did not expect that answer, but I said, Pasi, would you mind just taking a couple of minutes and say, now, they're gunning for you, that they think they can do it as least an inspiring and maybe more inspiring job of transforming their schools as Finland did. Would you mind giving them a little advice? And so Pasi did this for us. So if we could show Finland.
Hello, everybody. My name is Pasi Sahlberg. I'm an educator from Finland, but I'm sending you this note from my summer place in Croatia. I heard from Ted that you're doing some pretty interesting things in education, improving schools and learning for your children. You know, if I was in your shoes, I would definitely focus on three things. First of all, I would make sure that our curriculum and whatever we do in schools and classrooms would focus on real world problems so that the kids could learn and solve problems and issues that are meaningful for them. This is what we try to do in Finland more and more right now. Secondly, I would make sure that all the teachers and principals are well prepared to do that they are educated and aware of the complexity of learning that takes place when we work on these real life problems. And thirdly, and this is probably the most important thing that we have in our Finnish schools, is to make sure that children can learn together, that they can collaborate and help one another, and also that the schools have a culture of collaboration so that teachers work together and principals work together with teachers, but also with other schools. Collaboration is much better strategy for success than competition and race to the top. Good luck, keep on doing good job. I hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
So now you have to ignore the picture. The picture actually looks like what you might see in a post office. If you just, it's like the most wanted list, Pasi Sahlberg. But they've done amazing things, and I want to highlight the themes he raised. And I'll start with the teachers, and that was one of the things that gave me the most conviction about what is going to take place here in North Dakota, because I've been here 6 times now. But one of the best 2 weeks of my life, and you would think if you're on the East Coast with your family near the ocean, you would not necessarily think that your best highlight of the summer or your life even would be 2 weeks all across North Dakota, the end of August and September, including Labor Day weekend here. But that's what I did. And we organized a statewide sort of a set of community forums, showed the film in a lot of places. I often tell my friends, if you look at any decent-sized Google map of North Dakota, we did an event there. And I got a chance to talk to so many people, and each day we set up meetings with some of your teachers. And so point number 1, the teaching force in North Dakota is extraordinary. I mean, it is unbelievable. That's not just one teacher or 2 teachers, and we're going to have panels with lots of teachers, but it's not a 1 or 2. There's a consistent depth, a commitment, and a dedication to the students. And the second thing is, and this is what my friends in Palo Alto and Boston, don't fully appreciate, the amount of innovation here in the teaching force is remarkable. And so there are great things going on. There are inspiring things going on. So that's the first point I make. The second point, and I really want to emphasize this, and I'm going to give some very specific examples, is that connection to the real world. And what I find, and what breaks my heart in so many places I go, in so many schools I observe, is we have this notion of the following, right? We wonder why, people in our society don't necessarily have a level of commitment to their community. But think about the average school experience, and this isn't a North Dakota observation, this is across the United States observation, is for every school day for 12, 13, 16, 17 years, we will tell kids the most important thing you can do is outperform your classmates on material you don't care about to either please some anonymous college admissions officer or get a certain grade or test score. And we somehow think that if we tell them that year after year after year during these precious school years that form their values and their outlook, that somehow when we hand them the diploma, they will then become a responsible, informed citizen, somebody that's dedicated to making their world better. And maybe we say it in the graduation speech and think that 15 minutes in the graduation speech will do it when we've given them this entire arc of feedback and validation for what we care about, which is beating classmates on things you don't care about that often have no connection to the real world. Things that get me excited, things that you're doing that I think are really inspiring. I mean, I spent a bunch of time here at Legacy. They're doing really great things. Different examples. We often think that it's kind of either or STEM or the liberal arts. And it's not either or, it's both. And so, yeah, and so I spent an afternoon at Ben Franklin Middle School in Fargo. And I've got a new book coming out. I write about this. 8th grade students, they say, what can you do to make your community better? These students say, we think we could capture the story of historic buildings in downtown Fargo. That's very interesting, right? To ask 8th graders to define the criteria for what is an historic building. They are thinking like historians. They go out, they do research in libraries, they interview adults, they put together these stories. They have to think about how do they communicate those stories. Some write essays, some do photo montages. Some of them say, why don't we do short videos? They do short videos. Somebody else says, well, why don't we put them on a website? They do a website. Somebody else says, why don't we do signs for these buildings and put up QR codes that link them? They do that. They say, why don't we organize a community event, invite the mayor, the town council, adults, parents, whatever. They do that. And these kids, when you go there and you say, how do these kids feel about school? They can't wait to get to school. They're seeing that they can learn things that make their community better. And that's that tangible connection to the real world that in and of itself transforms school. You're cutting across disciplines. You're working as teams. You're doing exactly the kind of things you're going to do once you're out of school. A second example right here, because we ran a sort of not really a contest, but we asked teachers and students to do things that were going to make their world better during this past school year. Simley Middle School, Ryan Townsend, 8th grade kids. I mean, it's an unbelievable project where these kids say, there are a lot of homeless people in Bismarck. This is not an easy place to be homeless, particularly January, February, March. And so they come up with the idea of, could we do solar-powered cell phone charging stations? And they did that. So they're inventing this, designing it. And they realized if we're going to locate them someplace, this could affect the surrounding community. We need to go out and talk to the people that would be near that to make sure we're getting community input. So you think about that set of challenges they're facing. It's ambiguous, it's messy. It requires all sorts of skills. And it is going to make their community better. I visited that class. I mean, these kids cannot wait to get to school. They are so excited. But the most important thing about that I saw, and Ryan sort of confirmed it, is one of the really negative things about school is for every 1% that school tells kids that are gifted, it's telling 99% of the kids you're not. And so what if, just imagine, if the role of school was to help every kid find the way they're gifted, instead of use test scores to tell kids which narrow slice are gifted on a measure that's totally inauthentic and has nothing to do with the real world. And so these kids in Simley, some kids are really good with their hands. They make a huge contribution to that team. Some are really creative. Some are great at interviewing adults. Some are great at summarizing and synthesizing the projects. And so these kids are just on fire with their interest and passion for school. Third, and I'm going to make him stand up, but there's a student here. Is Chris here? Chris, stand up. So I want you to understand, I talked to Chris before. Chris drove here himself from Fargo. I know now how long the drive is from Fargo to Bismarck. So Chris drove here himself because he's so interested in education. So what's the project he's doing in his school? He said that there are infinite numbers of online resources. And as the governor said, how do you help students find the right resource? And how do you help teachers inspire these kids but make them more effective in terms of making the right recommendations? So he's developed a smartphone app for teachers to help when a student says, I'm having trouble with something, the teacher now has a very efficient way to say, you might want to look at X or you might want to look at Y. So I asked Chris, I said, do you do this for a grade? No. Was this an assignment? No. Is this making your world better? Absolutely. He's connecting what he's doing. He's passionate about doing something that's cutting across a whole set of disciplines to make his world better. And so to the extent that is the goal of school, to the extent we start to restore real purpose in the lives of our kids, to the extent they realize that they can leverage their talents and their passions and learn how to learn to make their world better, to the extent teachers play the role that you guys are so amazing at playing, which is guiding, advising, inspiring, connecting kids to adjacent areas, that is the education revolution we need. The final thing, and Pasi emphasized this, is the collaboration. And we know when you're an adult, collaboration is essential. But most schools, collaboration stops on the website. I visit so many, this is again not North Dakota, this is national. I visit these schools, they will tell me at the front door, collaboration is really important. We know that's an important thing for kids going forward in their future. And then you say, give me some examples. And they, invariably it's, well, we tried a group project in a science class, but one kid did all the work and the other two didn't, so we kind of dropped that. And you find that there's a lot of collaboration in after school, which is why so many people, when they describe the most important education experiences they have, point to after school activities instead of in school. It shouldn't be that way, but it's not embedded in our classroom. When I did my 2 weeks here last fall, one of my takeaways was the following. We did these 8 community events. What I saw here, I promise you, you would not see in any other state in the country. And I really, it breaks my heart to have to share this with you, but in so many states in the country, there are such fierce battles between the adults, infighting, snarking. I liken it to a game of tug of war where the adults are pulling against each other, breaking this rope to the stretching point, and it's the poor students that are in the middle, getting stressed every which way from Sunday but going nowhere. When we did these events, at almost every one of the events, we had the following, and I tell this to people all over the country. I say, imagine this. We had a senior person from the Department of Public Instruction, often Kirsten. We had a senior representative of the Chamber of Commerce. We had a senior representative of the Teachers Union. We had Amy from the Parents and Teachers Association. And in many places, we had 1, 2, or more state legislators from both sides of the aisle. And so the best thing I can tell you today is the following, is you now have, you can do this. You have a remarkable teaching force. You are doing the most innovative things. You heard the governor. He's saying, bring it on. We welcome that. Senate Bill 2186. Legislators are saying in their own way, we want our schools to be innovative. You heard from Kirsten. You have permission to innovate. Now, here's why you need to do this, right? And you're going to do it. Is that these kids, walk around any school, and you look at these kids and they look up at you, and they have the most trusting look on their face, right? They are counting on us to make good decisions on their behalf. A 10-year-old cannot advocate for their best long-term interests. They are counting on groups like this to make the right decisions. So if, in fact, we continue, and this is, again, a national observation, if we continue to prepare these kids for the jobs that are going away, if we continue to gut them of any sense of purpose, if we continue to crush their creativity and curiosity, and they leave high school or college, and they're adrift, and machine intelligence has raced forward and taken out of the economy all the routine, go-through-the-motion jobs, guess what? It's not that 10-year-old's fault. We own this problem, right? So this is, to my knowledge, the first in the history of our country statewide summit laying out an aspirational view. And I want to tell you this. If you go to a school, it's very difficult to be the one lone innovative teacher in that school. It's a lot easier for 10 teachers in a school to innovate than one. If you go to a community, it's very difficult for that one outlier alternative or progressive school to do what it's doing. But if everybody works together, if we view this collectively as our challenge to deliver an aspirational view of what school can be for our kids, and share each other's successes, learn from each other's setbacks and hiccups, which are going to happen, we can do amazing things. And so I'm here, I have to be honest, I have a selfish reason for continuing to come to North Dakota. I care a lot about your kids, and I know you do. This is a fight worth fighting. But given the amount of dysfunction across the country in so many places, given the lack of a perspective on what can be done, my bet, my reason for continuing to be here anytime they call and say, can you come to North Dakota, is you can lead the way. You can inspire places all around the world with what can be done collectively when adults say, we are going to do everything we can to give our kids the very best chances going forward. So I'm deeply grateful. I'm excited for the day. We've structured it so you're going to hear a lot about what's going on in the state. I speak for all the other people who are here from out of town. We will be here all day. Love to hear from you. And it really is a collective discussion about what can we do as a group to transform our schools at warp speed and give these kids the very best life prospects they deserve. So thank you. I'm really grateful you're here.
Thank you, Ted. So one of the exciting parts about the way that this schedule was formatted is that not only do we get to hear about the best and hear from the best and the brightest from across the country, we also get to hear from the best and the brightest across the state of North Dakota. So with each speaker, we are going to be inviting 4 or 5 panelists representing teachers, representing parents, administrators, business. We've put together a wide variety of profiles who represent all of the different factions that are necessary to truly drive innovation forward. So we're incredibly excited to welcome to the stage today Eric Sanders, a teacher from Red River High School in Grand Forks. Amy Arness, the immediate past president of the North Dakota Parent-Teacher Association. Amanda Meyer, former principal and now superintendent of Wilton Public Schools. And Peyton Cole, a member of Superintendent Baszler's student cabinet member, originally from the Park River Public School District. So before I kick it over to Ted, the goal of this time is to be as interactive as possible. I know Ted will be asking questions of our panelists, but wants you to directly engage with him and them as well. So we have mic runners who are going to be located on both ends of the auditorium. If you have a question that you would like to ask Ted and the wonderful panel that we have here assembled today, throw your hand up and we will make sure that we get a mic to you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ted and our panelists. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. So I'm going to ask each panelist to sort of deliver to you their perspective on the important issues for an aspirational view of what can be done in terms of education in North Dakota. Then actually my first choice is that I ask no questions. So I will then at that point ask the audience for questions. If you guys will have questions, but if for some reason people don't, I'll fill in. But anyway, so be ready with your questions because we'd love to hear from you about the issues on your mind. So Eric?
My name's Eric. I teach English at Red River High School in Grand Forks. I also have what is called an innovations class. It's kind of a loophole class, so when students register for it, they have to look for applied communications, which we call that good, but it's kind of a treasure they have to dig for a little bit. But innovations class basically asks students to propose projects, carry out projects, and find purpose and passion in what they do. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Good morning, everyone. Amy Arness, North Dakota PTA. And we kind of have what I would focus on, 3 buzzwords with PTA. It's advocacy, a word you've heard from every speaker on the stage, collaboration, and family engagement. And the organization here in North Dakota just celebrated 102 years, which is a wonderful thing and a rich history, but we also strive to remain relevant into the future and do the best that we can for our kids. So I always say I just try to continue learning along with my kids. My youngest just graduated from college, so I'm in a supportive leadership role and just want to help parents along. Ted made a great statement on our conference call the other day. Parents don't mean to slow down the process, but they are risk averse. Meaning that they want things to be the way that they were when they went to school. And you know, the evidence is that things aren't the way they were when we went to school. So we will just keep learning along with you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Meyer, and I am the principal, soon to be superintendent in Wilton. And something that we really focus on in Wilton is taking care of the students first. So we focus a lot on the culture and the wellness and the health of our students, as well as the social emotional health, so that we're able to do some of the more innovative things because students are ready and able to learn.
Hey everyone, I'm Peyton Cole. I'm a sophomore at the University of North Dakota. I'm on my 2nd term of Superintendent Baszler's student cabinet, and one of my biggest passions is working to bridge the gap between high school and the transition to college, because there is a really big gap there, and it can be bridged, and we can do it, and it just starts by talking about it. So.
Great. So maybe we'll go back through and just your views on the most important priorities. What would you love to see the state focus on in terms of elevating learning outcomes for kids? And maybe specific examples that you feel have worked well, and maybe also reactions of the surrounding environment to the innovations you're doing.
One quick thing, Amy had said something about being risk averse, and I was just listening to Don Wettrick and Seth Godin talk about the risk that we're taking by spending $200,000 on a 4-year college for some students when they don't have a direction as well. And I thought that was really interesting to think about a risk that way. I mean, there's multiple different risks, and we just don't think of them in that kind of way. It was an interesting thought. But as far as education goes, and one thing that I really have seen in my innovations class is that students they own their own learning, and they're motivated to do things that they never thought they'd be motivated to do. As in talking about next year's innovations class, I have 25 students signed up for it, and I've talked to many of them about a project that we want to begin, and they say, well, get a hold of me this summer, and we can start working on it this summer, because it's not going to be able to get done if it's just the year. And to have students telling me that to get a hold of them during the summer is proof that class like innovations class can work, because they have the passion, and they want to create something. They want to have that purpose, and they want to have that responsibility to the world, and in the intrinsic motivation that comes with it.
PTA, I was consulting with our national, we have a national staff that's in Washington, D.C. that makes regular trips to the Hill and calls on our legislators. So we are very active at that level. At this point, there isn't any specific STEM legislation that they've been working on, but they do have programming that affects those needs. It's called STEM plus Families, and that's one thing that PTA is definitely strong on, is nationwide programming that's available to any school that has a PTA, and those programs come with being part of that. This particular program helps to demystify STEM for families and mobilize communities that are underrepresented. And that's what I guess I feel is one of PTA and parents' strengths, is to be supportive, to support, not to criticize, and be open to these new ways of doing things. The documentary, I think, illustrates really well when you see the parents go from skepticism to the process of just kind of letting their kids be the guinea pigs, and the fascination of coming up with the end of the project-based learning. So it's being supportive.
So your question was, what can we do here in North Dakota?
Yeah, or what would you love to see happen?
I think the biggest opportunity, and obviously all of you are here for a reason, but it's taking the minds that we have in this room and looking at people like Ryan Townsend or Tom Schmidt here at Legacy and what they're doing, and then how can we scale that at our schools, especially the rural schools. I think we have that how we've always done things mindset, so looking at what will that look like in our school. So for example, here at Legacy, they have a tech club that does all of their maintenance on their iPads and devices, and we don't have that number of students, but in Wilton we have one student who's working with our tech coordinator, and she's learning how to replace screens and how to fix devices when they go down, and she also does our website. So we don't have the skill that maybe Legacy does, but we have that same opportunity, and we take advantage of it. Same thing with the STEM. We don't have a STEM teacher, we don't have an innovations teacher, but we do have students taking STEM classes through MRACTC or going down to the Career Academy to experience auto collision and auto tech. So just breaking down those barriers and taking the opportunities that all of us have to collaborate and give those kids those opportunities, because they are available. And the state is so small when you look at who you can connect with and where those opportunities lie.
So kind of from a student's perspective, one of the biggest things that was surprising to me when I got to college is project-based learning, and how I was really thrown into that. And I didn't have that in high school. I graduated from Park River. And so to see that in college was not where I expected to find it. The biggest project I did was at the end of my spring semester, and I took a course, it was called Sustainable Cities. And our first half of the semester was learning about what makes a sustainable city. And our second half was, they basically gave us a plot of land in Grand Forks, the Ray Richards Golf Course, and they said, how do we make Grand Forks more sustainable? And that's all they said. And our final was to come up with a presentation, and instead of just having our professors there when they graded it, it was city officials, university officials, and so it really holds you accountable when there's a lot of important people that are taking time out of their day to come and see what you think could make Grand Forks a better community. And so that is not something I expected to find at UND, and I was really glad I did, and it inspired me a lot to hope that things, like projects like that, can come back to the high school level. Because when I reflect on my public education, I remember lots of projects in elementary school, I remember lots of projects in middle school, but then when I got to high school, there was this drought, and there are finals, and there's a lack of project-based learning, and that's really important. And another thing is, when you get to college, coming from a Class B school, I graduated with 34 in my class, which is big compared to some other ones. You get to college and you sit in a lecture hall with 300 people surrounding, learning the same thing as you. How do you transition your learning ability from sitting in a class of 14 to 300? How do you get the same out of that? How do you prepare to pass finals in the same way in high school as you did when you switch up the setting like that? So those are big things that I think the high schools in North Dakota can really work on improving.
Awesome. I'm going to make one quick comment, then audience, be ready for questions. But on the whole issue of rural, urban, resources, everything else, the reality is, you look at like that description, how do you make Grand Forks more sustainable? I mean, those are the questions any community faces, whether it's sustainability or whatever. There are these great latent opportunities, problems, challenges that are everywhere. I mean, I always say that the one thing my generation could take credit for is we did not shortchange our students on big problems we didn't step up to. And so, but, you know, and it's true, right? It's true. But then you think about the learning that goes into something ambiguous, difficult, messy. You know, like, how do you get at a problem like that? And here's what I find is that we have spent as a nation, and one of the things I think, I didn't highlight this before, that's a big plus for North Dakota is there's a healthy degree of skepticism here for what's coming out of Washington, D.C. And this, my observation here is bipartisan. I think No Child Left Behind was a disaster. Race to the Top said, how can we make that even a bigger disaster, and did. And now it's just pure chaos, I think, or confusion. And yet, we have spent all this time, in theory, saying our biggest problem in education is closing the achievement gap. Okay, except, how do we measure the achievement gap? Well, we measure it by, does a kid know vocabulary words most adults don't use in their normal conversation? And how fast and error-free can you do low-level math problems that any smartphone is better than? And those tests, this is important, those tests reflect the parents' commitment to success way more than the students' commitment to their own future. And so when you unleash these kids on these real problems and they see that they can make the world better, it's better learning, it's more engaging, and it lets teachers do, I think, what they entered the profession to do, which is to inspire their kids. Okay, so who's got a question here? Right here in the front. Here we go, right, she's right in the center there.
I have a question.
Okay,
well,
great.
I have a comment first for like
Chris.
what North Dakota can do to help students. I think that we should be keeping students' interests in mind, because for me, when I was growing up, all my parents told me that you can be basically whatever you want to be in life. And then I went through kindergarten, and I was still an excited kid. And then I went through like 3rd grade, 4th grade, and then I heard about middle school. And then after I heard about middle school, then it was like, oh, dude, like it's like a mile away for me to reach that goal. So I was still a little excited. And then I got in middle school, and then it's like, oh, now it's high school. And I'm like, oh, that's way far. That's 10 miles away. And then when I get to high school, it's like, okay, now you got to go to college for you to achieve that dream. So I think if we keep like interest in mind, what kids are interested in school, then they won't die that much. Like students won't start dropping out because they're still a little excited to come to school instead of like thinking, okay, I have like 20 years for me to even get to do whatever I have to do in school.
Awesome. Hey, you want to...
I just want to make a quick comment about Chris. So we were sitting up in the audience before we came on panel, and Chris came over, and his passion for what he wants to tell the world was immediately recognizable, and it just made me so excited. I have a 4-year-old, and I hope that we give the soft skills that whoever Chris gave those to, that he was able to come and communicate with complete strangers about what he's excited about. So give him another round of applause, please.
So I like your question, Chris. I think you begin to get students engaged when they find their passion. And it's hard to find your passion when you're 12 or you're 14 or even when you're 18. And there isn't really a way or a class you can take like Passion Finding 101. It's not a thing. But when you keep an open mind and when schools have open minds and they allow students to explore and push the boundaries a little bit, I think that's when students find more accountability for their own education, and they realize the importance of why they want to be there. And when you find that little bit of passion or something that you love to do, it inspires you to do it all the time. You love getting up, even if it's at 6 in the morning, you love getting up and you love doing it, and you will give everything you have to succeed at it. And so I think it's important to find your passion in order to find success in your education.
And Peyton, what's scary for me as a teacher is when I see students who think that their passion is being really good students. And that they say, well, my GPA is now 4.6, and I'm going, why is this the competition right now? They're not learning, they're focused on the grade way more than the learning and the passion, and they think that that's their ultimate goal. And I've had some students who've complained, well, why are we doing this project? Why are we doing like this? You're not teaching us anything for the ACT. I said, well, the ACT, I said, you have 60 or more years of your life left. Why this ACT test, why are we listening to a podcast? That's not on the ACT. Well, there's actually more ways to learn than just these couple ways that you've been taught in your life. I mean, there's so many more opportunities out there. I'm trying to help you figure those out as well, and so that that can kind of create the passion too.
And I think that's our opportunity, because at kindergarten graduation this year, we asked the kids what they want to be, and they want to be ninjas, and they want to be Lego builders, and my son wants to be Carson Wentz. So we need to build an environment where we don't hammer that out of them, so that by the time they're juniors, not all that they see is the ACT. How do we give them, and now we're asking questions, we're supposed to be answering them, but how do we give them that environment so that they can continue to want to be Lego builders and all of those things that they dream about when they're 5?
Awesome. There's a question, yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Sure.
There we go. Okay, yes. My question is a question of transition. I teach in higher ed. I'm a teacher of teachers, and I believe wholeheartedly in everything that you're doing, and I appreciate every comment that's been made. One of the frustrations I have is I'm teaching teachers, pre-service teachers, who have spent essentially their whole lives learning to bubble in the right bubble, and I'm trying to teach them to teach differently at the same time that they are supposed to be learning how to teach differently. And so I get a fair amount of pushback from some students, enough that it concerns me. And I do teach at Valley City State University, and I'm proud to say that we have small class sizes and we're hands-on and highly involved in technology, so we're doing the right things. However, I still have too many students who say, she made us work collaboratively and it was all process, and we never took any tests, so I really didn't learn anything in this class. Or I plan on teaching out of a textbook because that's how I learned best and that's how I'll teach best, and I don't really see a need for all of this problem-solving stuff. And so I'm kind of living in a gap world, trying to teach teachers to be the kind of teacher they never experienced. I'd like some advice.
Well, I think far too often in education we focus on the negative, so I just want to share with you that we employ 2 Valley City State grads, and they are very collaborative, and they do not teach out of the textbook. So you guys are doing something right, and I think by being here and asking the question means that you're engaged in the same conversation. But I think getting into classrooms with those teachers, I'm not in the university system, but our teachers all the time are saying, can we get student teachers? Can we get interns? Can we get these teachers in our classrooms so that they're seeing the things that we're doing? So maybe there's an opportunity to network with the university system to get these teachers in more practicums, more internships, or maybe even some mentorships with our newer teachers that are willing to share some of the risks and innovations that they're doing.
I definitely agree with the idea of making that real audience. I mean, you watch the kid on the preview who says, this is going to be so great when I'm done with this. I cannot wait to be finished with this and show it to everybody. And when it's real, it inspires them so much more. And I've seen that with my students, and I would hope that would be the same as with teachers, because when they have that real audience, and I know as teachers we do, but then they have to actually figure that stuff out. I've seen girls who have written a grant who I've never written a grant before, and they had found a mentor, and they were skipping other classes to show up to mine because they had to finish this grant, and it was the coolest thing. And when it was real and they had something else that was beyond me, that made it so much better for them.
It's a great point, and it's often like the cobbler's kids who have no shoes in terms of how we educate our teachers. You know, I'd make a couple points. I think one of the reasons it's difficult to change education is there's a reason we call it a system. There's several interlocking parts. I think each of those interlocking parts all want it to be different, but they all say, but I can't change unless everything else changes. I'd say on the teacher front, I'm happy to come back, but I mean, one of the opportunities you have is to pull together all your schools of education and say, what are we going to do to play a real leadership role in not only training our teachers while they're in school, but also in the field. I'm happy to help. I mean, our film, one of the hardest audiences for me to get to with the film has been schools of education. But we also have on our website these sparks that are like short professional development exercises. We were talking about it before. But the leverage points, colleges of education, huge leverage points. And the other one that I think is a big leverage point is changing the high school transcript and changing the college admissions process. And so if we could start to make some progress there, then we could start to do it. But as you know, these teachers desperately want to, it's like they're not sitting there saying, I don't want to, some, but I mean, most teachers, they really care about their kids and they want to do what makes sense and what will help their kids. And so I think the more we can leverage that up and give them encouragement, share their successes, and just sort of give them a sense of if you try something. The whole day I should highlight is that one of the challenges is how do you transform an existing school? Like you can, if we all said we're going to start a school from scratch with no constraints, we'd probably all come up with a very similar vision of what it would be, and it wouldn't look like an existing school. Easy, fair enough. How do you change an existing school with people already doing things with a whole set of expectations? And I'm a big fan of big change through small steps. Over and over, when I find schools or districts that say, we're going from here all the way over to there in one giant leap, the next thing I hear from them is it didn't work. And so the real question is, how do we set cultures? And you're going to hear from Ken Kay in the panel next, and there's an intention to the people that we brought here today who is amazing at helping schools and communities and districts sort of establish a North Star. Change for change's sake is a waste of time. I mean, when I see schools that give every kid an iPad and then they use it for electronic flashcards, I say, like, why? I mean, what's the point of this? And so having that North Star of what you want to accomplish, what are the outcomes that matter with your kids and your graduates, and then Susie Wise's panel early afternoon is big change through small steps. How do we create cultures of innovation in schools where everybody feels safe trying these small things that the downside is limited, but the upside is changing everybody's perspective about where real learning actually happens? Another question?
Can I just make one comment to add on to that, Ted? I've just been in the back so far, but we were all trying to listen intently to what was happening out here. And thus far, very inspiring. I think we all can feel very fortunate in North Dakota that we've got inspiring leaders that are just really out there wanting to be engaged and on the national level. And by being here, all of you are taking that step toward leaders and going to be going back into the communities where you are. And I just thank you for that.
Mr. Dintersmith?
Yeah.
Up here on the top.
Oh, good. Oh, hi.
Thank you. If I remember correctly from your book, you said that fifth graders, 80% were engaged upon graduation from fifth grade, and ninth graders, 40%. So you've got that middle school concept in there. What would you do with our new innovative legislation? We have an opportunity to change what happens in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th to address that issue. What would you do first if you had the opportunity?
Yeah. So I'm citing the results from Gallup organization actually does great work in their education area. And so they showed that the student engagement is sky high in the early grades. And by high school, it's actually quite low. And I find the same thing when I visit high schools. Most of the time, the only questions kids ask is, will this be on the test? And, and so what do we do? The other related thing that Gallup reported on is they looked at young adults. So they interviewed a bunch of 30-year-olds, more or less. And I'm a parent. You represent the parents. They asked these young adults questions that I think any parent would want to know in terms of, has my kid gotten started in life on a really good path? Are you happy? Do you look forward to your job? Can you support your family? Do you feel you're making a positive difference to your world and your community? And then they looked back at what changed those people educationally. You know what they found? Zero correlation to grade point average. Zero correlation to SAT or ACT scores. What mattered? Did they in school have at least one adult who took a personal interest in them and expressed in them a real belief and conviction that that kid has potential? That's the opportunity teachers have every single day, is to help a kid find the way they're going to make their world better. Second thing is, did they have a chance to take on ambiguous, messy, real-world problems? Third, did they have a chance to do apprenticeships or internships, connecting things to the real world? And so how do we change it? That's how we change it, is we may not be all of a school day, but I always say in the desert, it doesn't take a lot of rain to make the flowers bloom. And so if we can start letting kids have an opportunity to do those things in their school day, support them, support the teachers like Eric that are willing to buck a system and do really innovative things, that's how things change.
I think one important thing is to get rid of we're getting you ready for the next step. And so often, in high school, you're going to have to, and it's just too much of that. In high school, we say, well, in college, you're going to have to, whatever it is. And there isn't that idea of project-based learning. And when we have projects to do and when we can actually engage, and that's motivating for students.
Awesome. Oh, did you? All set? No, anyway, huge thanks to everybody.
I don't mean to interrupt and break up what I know is a great conversation. Please help me in joining and thanking our panelists and Ted for a wonderful conversation. Hope to continue it later this afternoon. So, thank you.